the NBA Finals currently going on. As we know, it's the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, two small market teams. So, as we know, we live in a world now where it's not just the big markets competing. Like back in the day, it's not just Boston and LA. It's not, New York was never quite fully there, but it's not just the big markets. You have small market teams performing on the biggest stage. I think that's brought a lot of mixed emotions, mixed opinions. So my question to you all, do you think it is good for the sport of basketball when you have two small market teams duking it out in the NBA Finals? You have two, Indiana and Oklahoma City, two cities that are not considered major cities in this country, but they are currently the epicenter of the basketball world. So how do you feel, does this benefit the game? Yes or no?
As an outsider, I would say hell yeah. I mean, I think so often you see the big teams succeeding, an LA Lakers or, Golden State Warriors, Celtics. And, they're established. They got their history. It's still cool to see them do well, but it's even cooler to see something new. And I think, especially for smaller cities too, that could be like a big source of pride and, something they don't experience all that often. I think, who was it that won a trophy in the Prem this season? Was it Newcastle Dre? Who, I think it was like they had gone X amount of years without winning, and finally they won something. Similar to Tottenham, I guess.
Palace won the FA Cup.
Palace, that was it.
The Newcastle too, they won the Carabao Cup. So a lot of things happened this season like that.
But I think Crystal Palace was the one where it was like an actual, like, very long time. Like
the first trophy ever. It was the first major trophy.
There you go. First trophy ever. And it's like, you wouldn't expect that normally. You wouldn't expect that to be possible. But, that's what keeps the fans going too, is that hope, that dream. And then finally, when they get that opportunity and they actually win it, I mean, there's nothing sweeter than that. And as like a neutral or as a bystander, I think that's always cool to see. So, especially for a finals this year, as someone who occasionally tunes in to the last few games, I will be tuning in because, I haven't seen these players, I haven't seen these teams before at this level. I'm curious.
I think maybe it's two different questions. Like, if it's good for the game of basketball, the sport of basketball, and if it's good for the NBA. And to be fair, you think those two things are the same thing, but sometimes they're actually not. Like, sometimes what the NBA wants or what's good for the NBA's pockets isn't necessarily what's great for the sport of basketball. Maybe long term, if it's good for basketball, it's good for the NBA. At least you hope that, like, even if short term, it doesn't benefit the NBA. That however many years down the line, you see the trickle effect. Let's say use these finals for example. Maybe short term, the NBA is like, you kind of would have hoped it would have been bigger market teams, more people tuning in, more people invested, more relevancy, I guess, in the global mind. Because if you see even Lakers, Knicks, Warriors, for the Warriors, I guess it's more of a recent thing too in themselves, but Miami, Chicago, things like that. We want those big teams in it because that even helps our brand globally. When the people from abroad hear, oh, Miami's in the finals, like, we know Miami as a city. I might check that out, whatever. And also, obviously, helps if you have LeBron James on Miami Heat, like, at that point in time as well. But the NBA might be like, oh, maybe that's not the best for us. But for the game of basketball, like Alexi said, having that kind of concentration in those cities, like, for tourism for those cities as well, the youth of those cities seeing basketball concentrated in their city, that could give kids in Oklahoma City and Indiana I'm trying to think of a phrase that's not sus. That can give them a little spark, that would make them think, oh, maybe one day I can be playing in the NBA Finals in my city. Or maybe one day I can be playing in the NBA Finals big team too. Who cares? But I think long term that would be good for basketball. But short term, that might not be good for the NBA specifically. And I think another example is like the style of play in the NBA that came about like mid 2010s with the Curry era and that kind of thing. For the NBA, that was good. Like, that would make good TV. Curry specifically made good TV. That was exciting. But then we see the long-term effect of like what that's doing to youth basketball, what that's doing to a lot of other teams other players who aren't on Curry's level. Now we're just seeing. I know we might disagree slightly about this, Eric, but like the three spam, a lot of fans don't like that. Even if that came from a really exciting time in basketball, now you're hearing stories of like in youth AAU, kids are just spamming threes, like the fundamentals of basketball are going out the window. But for the NBA, that was great at the time, but for the game of basketball, it wasn't necessarily. So I think those two things don't always align. And for specifically the question you asked about the small market team, I do think it's good for the game of basketball long term, but short term for the NBA, I'm not sure, because you do see a lot of people who aren't super invested being like, Knicks didn't make it. Even if it was Minnesota, that's still kind of the same situation with the two that are there right now. But Knicks didn't make it. There's nothing really for me. There's no big celebrities. There's no Timothy Chalamet, no Ben Stiller going to the Indiana and OKC game for them. Like obviously you see Kai Cenat at the game, whatever, just because it's the finals. Like, and a lot of people are gonna hate that Kai Cenat's even there anyway. But just because it's the finals in general, but it's not like anything city specific. Where it's just like if the Knicks were in the finals, regardless, because it's the finals, it just gets magnified even more. Then you get even more New York celebrities coming out to the games because they're like, okay, the Knicks actually made it to the finals. Let me pop out, get my face out there. So I think those two things aren't always necessarily coexisting. But to answer your actual question without rambling so much, yes, I do think it's good for the game of basketball. But for the NBA, I think it's a different story.
100%. I do want to acknowledge, thank you for making that distinction, because I was intentional about the way I asked that question. I think the big thing that people have been pointing to is, man, Indiana and Oklahoma City, man, they're going to have terrible ratings. And as we've seen, they have had not great ratings. The game one did not have great ratings, even though it was a really good game. But I definitely hear you. I agree with the fact that at the end of the day, who cares about ratings, man? It's not like our pockets are being benefited when you have big market teams going at it. And I know I've pointed this example out previously, but like in the MLB, we had Dodgers versus Yankees this past year. And I mean, obviously I'm biased. I am a Yankee fan, but the whole world I felt like was buzzing, and I would tune into the games. You had the celebrities showing out, you had people going. And I will say, like, yes, that's cool. It's good to see everything buzzing, but I think you can also make the argument that, like, it's also can sometimes even take away from the game. And I'm not one to just, I love when non-fans tune in. Like I said, I was very happy to see non-basketball fans passionate about the Knicks. Like, that was cool to me. It was cool to see the city excited. But, like, because we live in the social media age where, like, you will see, and this bleeds into this does not just apply to sports, but we live in a world where just simply being there is cool enough, so people will just go just to be there. Like, oh, I'm gonna go because I've heard a lot of people buzzing about it, because I've seen it all over my Instagram. I'm gonna be there so I can look cool. And I think that bleeds into concerts, for example. You have people always criticize like crowds at concerts and how they're not singing along anymore. How you have people who are just there to record, just there because they heard the song on TikTok, or I think you can make the argument that we live in an age where that's going to be very common, and it bleeds into other worlds and not just the sports world. But I have seen people say like, man, David Stern has got to be like rolling in his grave right now because he's seeing how much the new the new NBA world that Adam Silver has established makes it so that pretty much all teams have an equal chance of taking it all. And we've seen small market teams make it big. We've seen Denver win a championship. We've seen Milwaukee win a championship. Cleveland was a small market team, but because they had LeBron James, maybe didn't necessarily feel that way in the 2010s. But small market teams winning it all is not a new thing. Oklahoma City Thunder, also a small market. But I will say, for these current finals, like, both of these cities deserve an NBA Finals. I did not want Indiana there, obviously, but that is a passionate basketball city. If you see how the crowd is and how crazy they will get very passionate, and they are a small town that rides behind their team. And you could say the same thing about Oklahoma City Thunder. And you always, I think, one of the most common photos that I see when I'm scrolling and when I've seen people post about like nostalgic NBA Finals are like the old like 2010s like Oklahoma City crowds, where you had all the fans in blue or all the fans in white. So I think at the end of the day, if you are a basketball fan, if you are a fan of the league itself, like if you are watching because you want to see the best product out there, I think you can make the argument that yes. And I will say, small market teams, this is not bad for the sport. At the end of the day, yes. Are ratings affected? Yes. Do I think people should be too caught up on it? No. Do I care if I see people posting about the NBA Finals on social media? I don't, because I know I will be watching, you know what I mean? But, I know that same logic won't apply to everybody, especially because we have two budding superstars who, and crazy, I just called Tyrese a superstar, but, we'll just say that he's in the finals, right? But we have two unestablished names. You can make the argument, and Shea just won the MVP, but you have two new stars that a lot of people, the casual fan, may have not heard of too much. And so, yes, it's natural, it's expected that the buzz isn't going to be as crazy. But considering, I think it's interesting because people will throw lots of different, I guess just you could say like criticisms that are kind of, what's the word? That like, I don't know, you're saying like, oh man, we need new, contradicting, that was the word I was looking for. Like contradicting criticisms, right? So you have people saying, man, what are we going to do when Bron and Steph are out the door? What are we going to do when KD is out the door? And we have all these like stars who are on their way out. You have a finals with two new stars that nobody's heard about, yet people are still making the argument, man, I wish we were getting, X, Y, and Z. I wish we had Bron again. But doesn't that just perpetuate the problem that a lot of people have been pointing out? Doesn't that just put us in the same hole where we're not producing new superstars? Like, I'm all for SGA getting the spotlight, man. I'm all for, he's literally the MVP. Like, I'm all for these teams getting their buzz. So I personally am a fan of it. I will just say it is interesting to see that it has been like widely criticized.
I think that was a good point you put there about the contradicting criticisms. Like, I do think the lack of, or at least the worry about the next stars is a bigger problem than whether or not the finals are taking place in big markets. Because like you said, LeBron James being the biggest star in the league, it didn't matter that no one ever wants to touch foot in Cleveland. LeBron James is the biggest, well, not even just the biggest star in the league, one of the biggest sports stars on the planet. So a small market team can be in the finals, and that's still a major event. It didn't matter. So if you can't have your cake and eat it too. Obviously, sometimes you can. Now LeBron's in LA, so maybe that's the match made in heaven everyone wants to see. But then, ironically, his one time in the finals with LA was the Mickey Mouse bubble ring. So like, even then, things couldn't work out perfectly for the NBA in that sense. But if you want to have stars, not every star is going to be in a big market. It's more important that this final series makes a star or potentially two stars that the league can have for the next 10 years. And then next year, say one of these teams are in the finals again, even if that's still going to be the same small market, but then you have a superstar on that team, which drives the audience to those finals rather than whether or not it's in New York or Boston or LA or whatever. That's what you want from the NBA. You want massive stars in any market that can drive those finals ratings, if that's what you care about so much. Because realistically, no fan actually cares about ratings until their team's not in the finals, and then they're going to say, oh, these teams don't bring ratings. Really, throughout the year, do you ever sit there, like, as a fan of a sport, do you ever go, you know what? think I'm gonna Google these ratings. Like, let's be real, bro. No one's Googling ratings. I don't watch Chelsea, and then like after the game, like, I wonder how many people tuned into that game live. Like, what? That's not realistic. That's not real. Like, obviously, we may have looked up the ratings. Or say, like, Eric may have looked at the ratings specifically to have this conversation about the topic, or because other people online are saying the ratings are down. But generally, like, what fan of like a sport, like the product of the sport, actually cares about how many numbers the sport is doing on television, especially on mainstream television? Like, that can't even encapsulate how many people are actually tuning in. Because most of these impressions, you want to be coming from social media anyway these days. So that whole thing to me that's all falsified. That's all, like, people wanting to get on their soapbox and say the ratings are down. And realistically, who cares? Like, genuinely, who cares about that? So I don't know. I think the conversation that's more important, like that you mentioned, that maybe we can have that after these finals and heading into next year, see where the state of that is the next star situation after LeBron, Curry, KD era. That's more important to me, because then once you have those stars, any market's viable. But whether or not it's a small market, big market, that's honestly irrelevant.
100%. And we grew up in the era where Oklahoma City was booming. And maybe it's because we were younger, but the kids were behind Kevin Durant. But the kids were all for Kevin Durant and Russ. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I don't know why I did that. But, Harden, Russ, and KD, man. I think we identified with that team. I wasn't a Thunder fan, but, like, I did not like LeBron. To this day, do not like LeBron. So he was rooting for that Oklahoma City team. So at the end of the day, I think you also got to think about who is the young audience watching. Shea, obviously, we always mention he has that little, like, aura gimmick, and I'll call it a gimmick because I think it's a little corny, but the aura gimmick that's kind of been placed on him. I can guarantee you that there are a lot of young kids right now growing up watching these finals, wanting to play like Shea, wanting to play like Tyrese, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's how you create a sustainable fan base. But just interesting.
It's funny you say that about OKC. And I think this is a perfect example of what we were just talking about with the small market and the star. Is that when you started this conversation and you said, is it bad for Indiana and OKC, these small markets, to be in the final? In my head, even subconsciously, I didn't even bring it up till now, till you just said that. To me, OKC never even felt like a small market team. And obviously they are. Like, obviously Oklahoma City is a small city. But even growing up, because our main NBA experience has been like at least for me, maybe you can go back to 2008, but like when I was actively watching 2010 afterward, OKC were in the finals like a year after that, and they had one of the best players in the league. The guy people would have said is the second best player in the league for a while, until maybe people wanted to bring in Curry or like that rivalry instead. But still, KD was still considered the second best player in the league after LeBron for a good chunk of time. So to me, for those however many years KD was there, OKC always felt like a massive team to me, even if the market was tiny, because it didn't matter because they had the star. So I think that's exactly what we're hoping can happen again with Hallie or Shea or Ant in Minnesota, or we would have hoped maybe Ja in Memphis or something like even those kind of things. You hope that the star can make the market, not the market making the star. Because I think right now, not to hate on Brunson, I think he is a great player in that sense. I feel like Brunson is on the verge of that being the market making the star rather than the star making the market. And maybe that's another debate to have for another day, because I don't want to trip that wire. But I do think that's an interesting. I think OKC is a great example. Even the fact that we call them OKC, maybe people in Oklahoma City always called them that. But growing up before the KD, Russ, Harden finals, I never even heard of Oklahoma City, and I would have never called them OKC. But now, just through NBA branding and those players being there and that being a relevant team, now I always refer to Oklahoma City as OKC, and that I always was just a decent sized city in my mind. I don't even know what the population is, so that's enough to say how important having a star in that city is.
100%. And happy to have that Jalen Brunson conversation because although I don't fully agree with what you said, I think there is truth to what you are saying, 100%.